What a beautiful day. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Groundskeeper's Diary. In this episode, I am very excited to finally get a chance to give you a complete walkthrough of the property, walk you through each of the 4 zones, talk about what's there, what we've already done, what are some of our challenges, and what are some of our goals and aspirations for each of them. Coming right up. All right, to give you a bit of context and help you orient yourself, we are looking at a relatively narrow land at the widest point. We're 600 feet from the east to the west line, which means the road behind me on the north side of the lot is actually about a mile, just over a mile or under 2 kilometers away from where we are going. Historically, this piece of property was used primarily as pasture for grazing cattle, and it actually hasn't been operational for what we are guessing about 75 to 100 years. We have what I would consider about 4 zones from here to where we are going. All right, let's talk about zone 1, or what I call the residential zone. This is where we live. This is where our house is. Sorry, I'm distracted by a beautiful cardinal on the tree singing. I don't know if you can see it. This is where our gardens are, our permaculture gardens are, and then we are building our own homestead. We also have our business here, our bed and breakfast, where we welcome guests who are coming to the area to visit the wineries in the summertime. It is about, this zone 1 is about 5 acres of mostly clear cut, like what you see behind me, where it was clear cut for construction reasons about 10 years ago. Now I'm working with an Ontario program called the 50 Million Trees Program, which I will put a link to that in the description below, to plant some new seedlings and introduce some new tree population to the areas that were fully clear cut. We have crazy winds up here, and I'm sure not only that will make a lot of the bees and birds happy, it'll also cut back some of that erosion that we get from our intense, constant 40-kilometer-an-hour winds. All right, just wanted to quickly show you these. We got our little mini apiary about a year ago, and they are the most important component of any permaculture design. Get your pollinators. They're the most beautiful creatures. They will benefit you. They will benefit the environment. You'll get honey at the end of it. It's a little cold, they're not out yet, but that sun will hit those hives very quickly. It'll warm them up, and there's going to be a lot of activity, so I better get going. I mentioned permaculture gardens. We started our design and implementation last year. We've had a few minor obstacles along the way that have slowed us down, and then there was winter. So this summer I'm really looking forward to picking that up again and moving full steam ahead. We have our chickens set up. They're healthy and happy. You saw our little mini apiary. We started planting our apple and pear and fruit trees last year. So there's definitely going to be a lot more work this year. And just wanted to show you this guy, our most majestic and oldest apple tree on the property. It's a Macintosh apple that was never pruned before we came here, and it's definitely overgrown. But man, it produces so many apples every year. All right, and we are now reaching our houses. That is our bed and breakfast called the Edward. And these 2 little guys are our houses. We call them the garden house because they are placed right on top of where the gardens used to be. That was one of the obstacles I was talking about. Last year we had some shifts in planning, and we had to move our house right where we had started implementing our permaculture gardens. So, well, it happens, and you learn and you move forward. I'm gonna go let the chickens out. I'll show you our beautiful laying hens, and then we're gonna move on to zone 2. All right, I'm by the chicken coop, and I'm about to let the chickens out. I'm gonna really have only one shot to take this. This is their best part of the day when I let them out. Here we go. Woo! Hi, beauty. I'm just showing them off. All right, on to the zone 2. walking towards the trails that will take me to zone 2. You can see the garden house behind me. Unfortunately, our orchards are blocked off by some of the construction that's going on, so I'm not going to go that way, and I will keep the tour of our gardens for another video. So zone 2, this is where things start getting a little bit interesting. And we walk through the arbor and through the trails. I've been working on carving these trails for the past year or so to give me access to some of the areas further down the land. We have a primarily self-grown forest here. This is what happens when you leave a farmland behind and you have self-seeding, animals spreading the seed of other plants, and self-propagation. Some of the areas are quite dense and you can't really get through it, so cutting trails is going to become really important. Some of the areas, however, are very sparse, so you don't really have a consistent growth pattern here. Primarily, you're looking at red cedar, with some ash growing in there, some prickly ash shrubs as well. But that low level of biodiversity is actually giving a lot of space to some invasive species taking over. So we have, common buckthorn, European buckthorn, dog strangling vine, and then so on and so forth, kind of, start invading and then pushing out some of the native species. And that is definitely a problem that we're going to have to remedy in this area by introducing back some of those native species and trying to mitigate some of the invasive ones. About our trails too, we have just under a kilometer worth of pathways carved out so far, which won't even get us a third of the way in, but gives us enough access to get through. Most of it has been following the naturally formed footsteps of the white-tailed deer, and also where some waterlogging was happening because of the elevation drop. So trees didn't have a chance to grow in those areas. It just makes it easier to get through some of the more densely grown areas where red cedars are so compact that you can't get through. But this will get us to the skyward cabin. So let me quickly show you that. So about a year ago, when I was working on the trails, we had this idea of why not build a cabin in the middle of the woods to enjoy some quiet time. I love the skies here at night. It's perfect for stargazing. So we thought, why not, hey, make a cabin out of glass walls, glass ceilings, so you can actually, when you're lying in bed, you can enjoy yourself, and do some stargazing. So what's behind me is the result of that conversation. We built this cabin. It's called the Skyward Cabin. I will show you, it's not fully set up yet, but it's going to be available for booking this summer. It's essentially a beautifully designed greenhouse with a bed in it and all the amenities for you to spend a couple of nights, enjoy some quiet time, listen to the sounds of nature, and go off grid. I'm super excited about this. I'll make a full video for this cabin particularly very soon. One thing I wanted to show you is this sort of remainder of a beautiful rock wall, a limestone rock wall, and a fence that repeats every sort of 3 acres or a hectare or so, and then they are basically dividing up this piece of land. They're a great indicator that this was used as a pasture, and then these walls were to divide up the cattle and then do rotational grazing through different areas, so to avoid overgrazing. It's just beautiful to see something from about 100 years ago left behind here. I mentioned the low biodiversity in Zone 2. Another one of the major characteristics of this area is the inconsistency in the growth patterns. This is a young forest, so it is quite expected. We are estimating an average age of 75 years. So you have areas where the trees are growing really densely packed to and close to one another, maybe about a foot apart, which makes navigating through that area very difficult. The ground, like here, is covered in moss. The humidity level is much higher. Then you have areas where it's open grassland, and you basically have a field where new seedlings or saplings haven't had a chance to really grow and recover the forested area, either because the ground is too wet and then you have waterlogging, or you have a very limited and small amount of topsoil, less than 6 inches in some areas, before you hit the limestone bedrock. I will show you one of those areas in a second. I just wanted to show you this. This is a naturally formed swale or waterway. It's covered in grass, but and you can't see it, but under my feet is actually it's wet. There is water sitting under this grass, and clearly there's a path where no trees have really been able to grow because of the amount of water content in the soil. And before I move on to zone 3, I just wanted to show you one of those open grass fields that I was talking about. Again, the water content is quite high here. I can actually see that there is maybe about an inch or two of water under this grass. So red cedar doesn't really like that too much. So as you can see, this whole area, the seedlings have not really had a chance to grow bigger than a couple of feet tall. And yeah, it's a bit of a barren. I call this area the Badlands. All right, finally I've arrived at zone 3. The area right behind me is a seasonal wetland. I'm gonna try and speak a little bit more quietly, not to disturb nature. I don't know if you can hear all the frogs making their racket. They're probably coming out of winter hibernation and getting ready for a spring activity. It's quite a magical place. I'm standing in about 6 inches of water right now. I don't know if you can see. It makes walking and filming a little bit trickier. So I'm going to try and pay attention to where I'm going and show you some of the very cool landmarks in this area. Our goal is to preserve this as much as possible in the state it is in. Try and monitor the flow of the water in and out of here. Like I said, it's a seasonal wetland, so I'm not 100% sure if it ever reaches a fully dry season. I'm going to be taking a closer look at that this year. But so far, it's beautiful. This is right behind me, one of the 2 main water features here. I call these the mallard ponds, mainly because they get occupied by mallard ducks, which are very territorial. They're not here yet. The frogs are now more quiet because I'm pretty sure they heard me come, so they're being a little bit more careful. But this water level stays at about 2 feet most of the year. There is vegetation growing right under the water. I'm not 100% sure if you can see it, but that grass will eventually come right to the surface. So from any drone or satellite imagery that I had seen before coming here and checking it out in person, this little pond always looked green. So I just thought it was a grassland until this spring when I came here and I saw that there was actually a pond here. I'm going to keep an eye on it, see how it does, how the water level fluctuates throughout the year, and whether there is anything I can do to help it along the way, or maybe I should just leave it alone. At the very least, I'm thinking a little bench or a chair here for some quiet time readings would be pretty spectacular. And this behind me is the source of the water. Half of that goes into that pond that is to my left side, and you see the rest of it, actually the overflow comes from here, goes right through this little tiny stream, goes across, goes towards east and down escarpment, and finally it reaches Lake Ontario. But this is the water that is feeding into that pond and is keeping it alive, providing a habitat for a lot of frogs, a lot of insects, and as a result, food for birds. As I'm walking through the stream, before I go on to zone 4, I just wanted to mention that I've been keeping an eye out for one keystone animal, and that's beavers, to see if there are any around here. They build dams naturally on waterways and little streams, and they create the richest, most beautiful ecosystem that you could imagine. I'm keeping an eye out on these ash trees particularly, and any signs of chewing. They do use the smaller branches from these guys to create dams. So I haven't seen any. I'm keeping my hopes up and fingers crossed I'll find one soon. The primary growth in zone 3, due to the amount of water that's constantly flowing through the area, is ash trees. Red cedars, because it's so wet here, they can't really establish roots and thrive in this area. So young ash trees have dominated majority of this sort of 15 acres of land. However, with that comes a different problem, and then in the past couple of years I've been keeping an eye out for it because I've seen quite a few ash trees that have fallen over and are dead, and I'm suspecting that we may be dealing with emerald ash borers, which is a beetle, type of beetle, that digs into the trunk of the ash and eventually kills the ash. There is a bit of a problem in Ontario with that. I don't have a lot of information on the ash borers, emerald ash borers specifically, so once I find out more about it, I will make another video and add a link to that in the description below. And here we are at the end of zone 3, and behind me is zone 4, which is our mixed growth 150-year-old plus white pine forest. All right, here we are further in to the center of zone 4. This area is quite magnificent. It's very special to me. I remember the first time I saw it, I think I screamed out of joy. The high level of biodiversity here is astonishing. We have, from a plant life perspective, we have quite a number of eastern white pine that is growing tall here. There is a lot of white cedar, red cedar still, and ash trees thriving here. We have about a 15 to 20 acre patch of land that is populated by primarily maple trees. I'm not sure what type of maple trees yet, and the understory is just magnificent. There has been a lot of old dead trees that are on the ground, and these stumps and snags are providing the best sort of habitat for a lot of different animals. We have a lot of rodents, so there's a lot of birds. It's just crazy. Every time I come here, I see something new. I don't know if the camera can capture the beauty and the scale of some of these trees. My microphone cannot capture the sounds that I'm immersed in. It's fantastic. It's beautiful. Zone 4 is definitely one of my favorites, not to pick any favorites. There is definitely a lot more work to be done in Zone 1 with our permaculture gardens, in Zone 2 with some restoration work, introducing some new plants, tree planting, and also trying to battle some of the invasive species that are taking over. With Zone 3, maintenance and taking care of the wetlands and making sure the ash trees are thriving. Zone 4 is doing what nature does best. It is beautiful, it is rich, it is vibrant, and most I can do is to stay out of it, come visit it once in a while, try and not disturb it, and then just take it all in, enjoy it. I hope you guys enjoyed this tour as well. This was a complete walkthrough of the Edward property. I can't show you all 75 acres of it, but as I do more discoveries around the property, I will make sure to bring the camera out. Until then, I'll see you outside.